The great council chamber of the Galactic Confederation buzzed with the voices of a dozen different species. Ambassador Zephyrian Kos adjusted his ceremonial robes and looked around the massive dome. Representatives from across known space sat in their designated areas, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. The Altarians, like Kos himself, were tall and thin with silver skin that caught the light. The Draconian delegates sat with their scaled backs straight and proud. Kashari scientists whispered to each other in their musical language, their forearms moving as they spoke. This was civilization at its peak, Kos thought. Peace, order, and progress. The council recognizes Dr. Velith Narn of the Kashari Science Institute, announced the speaker, her voice echoing through the chamber. Dr. Narn stood up, her blue-green skin shifting color slightly as she moved to the center of the room. She was small even for a Kashari, but her reputation was huge. She had spent her life studying the ancient past of their galaxy. Honored delegates, Dr. Narn began, her voice clear and strong. I come before you today with discoveries that will change how we see our history. Kos leaned forward. Narn always brought interesting findings, but she had a habit of making wild claims about ancient civilizations that probably never existed. On the dead world of Kepler 186F, my team found structures that should not exist, Narn continued. She activated a holographic display that showed twisted metal and strange buildings. These materials are stronger than anything we can make today. The buildings are designed in ways that ignore the laws of physics as we understand them. Admiral Thanevex, the Draconian military commander, let out a low growl. Dr. Narn, with respect, you show us pictures of wreckage and claim it proves impossible technology. Perhaps these are simply artifacts we do not yet understand. That is not all, Admiral, Narn replied. She changed the display to show weapon fragments. These weapon pieces contain energy patterns that suggest they could tear holes in space itself. And look at this. The image shifted to show writing carved into stone. This language appears on 12 different dead worlds, always near the strongest artifacts. Kos studied the strange symbols. They looked almost familiar, but he could not place them. Have you been able to translate any of it? Some of it. The most common word appears to mean protector or guardian, but there is another word that appears even more often. Narn paused for effect. Terra. And based on the context, I believe this refers to a species name. The chamber erupted in discussion. Kos held up his hand for silence. Dr. Narn, are you suggesting there was once a species called Terrans who possessed technology beyond our current abilities? More than that, Ambassador. I believe they were the first species to achieve faster-than-light travel. The legends speak of them as the first wanderers or the ancient guardians. Every culture in the galaxy has stories about mysterious protectors who appeared in times of great danger, then vanished. Admiral Vex stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber. Dr. Narn, you are asking us to believe in ghost stories. Yes, many cultures have legends of mysterious helpers. This proves nothing except that species like to tell tales. But Admiral, Narn pressed, what if these are not tales? What if these Terrans, these humans as some legends call them, were real? What if they still exist? The word humans sent a strange shiver through the chamber. It was an old word found in the most ancient databases. Most scholars believed it was just a translation error or a corruption of some other term. Kos was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Emergency lights flashed red as the main communication console activated automatically. Council, we have an urgent transmission from the Outer Rim colonies, announced the communication officer, a nervous Altarian who looked pale even for their species. Put it through, Kos ordered. The holographic display changed to show a Kashari colony administrator. His skin was flickering rapidly between colors, a sign of extreme distress. Council, this is Administrator Yeth on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by an unknown force. They are not trying to conquer us. They are consuming everything. Our cities, our ships, our people. They turn it all into some kind of living mass. The transmission flickered with interference. The attack began 6 hours ago. 3 of our defense fleets have been completely absorbed. Whatever these things are, they learn from what they consume. They are getting stronger. Admiral Vex stepped forward. Administrator, describe the enemy forces. They are not ships as we understand them, Admiral. They are living things the size of cities. They send out smaller creatures that attach to anything they touch. Within minutes, our technology becomes part of them. Our people, the administrator's voice broke. Our people become part of their collective consciousness. The transmission cut to static, then to nothing. The chamber fell silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Admiral Vex turned to his communication officer. "Contact the Third Fleet. Have them move to the Kepler system immediately." "Admiral," the officer replied, his voice shaking. "We lost contact with the Third Fleet 20 minutes ago. Their last transmission came from the Vega system, 2 jumps away from Kepler 442b. Fear spread through the chamber like a disease. The Third Fleet was one of their most powerful forces, with over 200 ships and the best weapons the Confederation could build. "How is that possible?" Koss demanded. "The Third Fleet could destroy most planetary defense systems single-handedly." More alarms sounded. The communication console lit up with incoming transmissions from across the outer rim. Colony after colony reported the same thing. Massive organic ships that consumed everything they touched, growing stronger with each victory. Dr. Narn stood quietly in the center of the chaos, her skin now a steady, deep blue. "Ambassador Koss," she said, her voice somehow carrying over the noise. "Perhaps it is time to consider that the ancient legends were more than just stories." "What do you mean?" Koss asked, though he was beginning to fear he already knew. "The legends all speak of great threats that came from beyond the galaxy, devourers who consumed entire civilizations, and they all say the same thing about how these threats were defeated." Narn looked directly at him. "They were stopped by the Terrans." "By the humans," Admiral Vex slammed his fist on the table. "Even if these Terrans existed, even if they had powerful technology, that was thousands of years ago." "They are gone!" "Are they?" Narn asked quietly. "Admiral, what if they never left? What if they have been watching, waiting, protecting the galaxy from threats we never even knew existed?" Before anyone could respond, every communication system in the chamber activated at once. A new signal came through, clear and strong despite coming from empty space. The message was in a language none of them recognized, but the computer translation appeared on every screen. "Terra sends aid." Koss stared at the message, his silver skin growing pale. Around him, the greatest minds of the Confederation sat in stunned silence. The legends they had dismissed as ancient myths were about to walk back into their reality, and none of them were prepared for what that would mean. The message, "Terra sends aid," had been broadcasting for 3 days when the impossible happened. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet emerging from the void between star systems. The ships appeared from nowhere, as if they had been hiding in empty space itself. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TCS Indomitable, watching the Confederation fleet scramble into defensive positions ahead of them. Her dark eyes showed no emotion as she studied the alien vessels through the view screen. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "the alien fleet is hailing us on multiple frequencies. They seem confused." "They should be," Vasquez replied, her voice calm and steady. "Open a channel to their flagship." The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of a Confederation vessel, and tall, silver-skinned Altarian in ceremonial robes stared back at her with wide eyes. "I am Ambassador Zephyrian Koss of the Galactic Confederation," the alien said, his voice shaking slightly. "Please identify yourself." "Captain Elena Vasquez, Terran colonial ship Indomitable, representing the Terran Expeditionary Force under the command of General Sarah Chen." Vasquez kept her voice professional. "We received your distress signals regarding the Devourer incursion." The silence that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds. Vasquez could see other aliens gathering behind the ambassador, their faces showing various expressions of shock and disbelief. "Terran?" Koss finally managed. "You are human?" "We are," Vasquez confirmed. "Ambassador, we need to discuss the current threat immediately." "The Devourers have consumed 4 of your outer colonies and are moving toward your core systems." A new figure pushed forward on the alien bridge, a blue-green Kashari with 4 arms. "I am Dr. Velith Narn. Are you truly the species from the ancient legends? The first wanderers?" Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. "Dr. Narn, your research into our history has been noted. Yes, we are the same species your legends describe. But we can discuss history later. Right now we have a war to fight." Admiral Thane Vex appeared on screen, his scaled face showing skepticism. "Captain Vasquez, your fleet numbers less than 50 ships. The Devourers destroyed over 200 of our vessels. What can you possibly do that we cannot?" "Admiral," Vasquez replied, "you have been fighting the Devourers for less than a week. We have been hunting them for over 3,000 years. The bridge of the human ship appeared on the Confederation screens. The aliens saw a crew that looked remarkably like many species they knew, but there was something different about them. The humans moved with a confidence that spoke of endless experience in battle. General Sarah Chen appeared beside Captain Vasquez. She was a small woman with graying hair, but her presence filled the screen. Ambassador Koss, I am General Chen. We need to coordinate our response immediately. The Devourers are not just consuming your colonies. They are learning from them. Learning? Dr. Narn asked, her skin shifting to a worried purple color. Every ship they absorb, every person they consume, adds to their collective knowledge, Chen explained. The longer we wait, the stronger they become. We need to hit them hard and fast before they adapt to your technologies. Admiral Vex crossed his arms. General, with respect, what makes you think human technology can succeed where ours failed? General Chen looked directly at the Admiral. Because we designed our technology specifically to fight the Devourers. Every weapon, every ship, every piece of equipment we carry was built for this war. She gestured, and the screen split to show technical displays. Your energy weapons feed the Devourers' power. Your shields use frequencies they can absorb. Your ships are built for territorial conquest, not for fighting an enemy that turns your own weapons against you. Captain Vasquez activated another display. Our weapons don't use energy in any form the Devourers can consume. Our ships can survive in conditions that would destroy normal matter. We've spent millennia preparing for enemies like this. Dr. Narn leaned forward. That's why you disappeared, isn't it? You didn't abandon the galaxy. You were preparing to defend it. Partially correct, General Chen replied. We also nearly destroyed ourselves in our early wars. We chose isolation until we could evolve beyond our destructive tendencies. But we never stopped watching. We never stopped preparing. Alarms suddenly blared on both fleets' bridges. A new contact appeared on long-range sensors. A massive organic shape moving toward them at incredible speed. Devourer scout vessel, General Chen announced calmly. This will be your first lesson in how we fight. The alien creature was enormous, easily the size of a space station. Its surface writhed with absorbed technology from dozens of different species. Weapon ports that had once belonged to Confederation ships now served the creature's hunger. The Confederation fleet began moving into defensive formation, preparing to engage at long range. The human ships did something completely different. They accelerated directly toward the enemy. General, your ships are moving into point-blank range. Admiral Vex called out in alarm. Correct, Chen replied. Watch and learn. The Devourer fired first, launching energy beams that had destroyed entire fleets. The attack struck the human ships and simply vanished, absorbed by hull materials that seemed to drink in the energy. The human fleet opened fire when they were almost close enough to touch the creature. Their weapons didn't look like energy beams or missiles. Instead, reality itself seemed to bend around their targets. Parts of the Devourer simply ceased to exist, as if they had never been there at all. The creature tried to adapt, growing new defenses from absorbed technologies. But the human weapons adapted faster, changing their attack patterns in ways that seemed to violate known physics. Within 10 minutes, the massive Devourer was gone. Not destroyed, erased. No debris, no energy signature, nothing remained. The Confederation fleet sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Koss was the first to speak. How? He whispered. The Devourers consume matter and energy, General Chen explained. So we developed weapons that attack the fundamental forces that hold reality together. We don't destroy our enemies. We convince the universe that they never existed. Captain Vasquez added. The process requires incredible precision and energy. Each shot takes years off our ship's operational lives. But it works. Dr. Narn's voice was full of wonder. You've been fighting creatures like this across the galaxy, haven't you? That's why you developed such extreme technology. Not just creatures like this, General Chen said quietly. We've fought things that make the Devourers look simple. The galaxy is full of threats that most species never see because we deal with them first. Admiral Vex looked at his own fleet, then at the space where an impossible enemy had simply vanished. General Chen, what do you need from us? Right now, stay out of our way while we handle the immediate threat. Long term? Chen's expression grew serious. If you want to join this war, you'll need to learn new ways of fighting. Your current methods will only make the Devourers stronger. Ambassador Koss took a deep breath. General, The Galactic Confederation formally requests military assistance from Terra. Granted, Chen replied immediately. But understand, this is not the kind of war you're used to fighting. We don't conquer territory or capture resources. We walk into the fire because someone has to, and we've made ourselves capable of surviving it. As if summoned by her words, new alarms sounded. Long-range sensors showed a massive Devourer fleet heading directly for Centralis Prime, the Confederation capital world. How long until they arrive? Koss asked. 18 hours, came the reply from multiple bridges. General Chen turned to Captain Vasquez. Elena, signal the fleet. Full combat deployment. It's time to show the galaxy what humans do when the fire gets too hot for anyone else. The Terran ships began changing configuration, their hulls shifting and reconfiguring into forms designed for the kind of war that existed beyond normal space. The legends were about to become very, very real. Centralis Prime hung in space like a blue-green jewel, home to 12 billion souls from across the galaxy. The massive orbital defense platforms that surrounded the planet had never been tested in real war. Today, they would face an enemy that turned defensive weapons into tools of its own hunger. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez checked his weapon one final time as the transport ship approached the lead Devourer vessel. Around him, his mixed team of human and alien special forces prepared for what most considered a suicide mission. "Sergeant," called out Lieutenant Keth, a draconian soldier whose scales had turned dark blue with nervousness. "Are you certain this plan will work?" Rodriguez looked at the alien through his helmet display. The draconian was young, probably had never seen real combat before joining this mission. "Lieutenant, I've been fighting things like this for 15 years. The plan will work. Whether we survive it is another question." Dr. Velith Narn sat at the rear of the transport, her forearms working frantically at a portable computer. She had volunteered for the mission against all protocols, claiming she needed to see Devourer technology up close. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she called out, "my scans show the mothership's hull is composed of absorbed materials from over 300 different species. How do we penetrate something like that?" "We don't penetrate it, Doc," Rodriguez replied, activating his suit's systems. "We get it to absorb us." The plan was insane, and everyone knew it. Instead of fighting their way into the Devourer mothership, the strike team would allow themselves to be consumed. Their specialized equipment would protect them during the absorption process, letting them operate inside the creature's body. Admiral Thane Vex's voice crackled over the communication system from the main fleet. "Strike Team Alpha, you are approaching the target. All defensive fleets are in position." Rodriguez looked out the viewport at the battle raging around them. The Confederation fleet had formed defensive lines around Centralis Prime, their energy weapons flashing against the organic hulls of the Devourer ships. Most of the attacks were absorbed, making the enemy stronger. The human fleet fought differently. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually calculated to confuse the Devourer's ability to adapt. When they fired, reality bent and twisted, causing enemy vessels to simply stop existing. But the main Devourer mothership was too large for even human weapons to erase completely. It stretched across hundreds of kilometers, a living space station that pulsed with absorbed life from 1,000 worlds. There, Rodriguez pointed through the viewport. "See that intake port? That's our way in." The transport ship began its final approach. Around them, smaller Devourer creatures swarmed toward the human vessel, ready to add it to their collective mass. "Remember," Rodriguez told his team, "once we're inside, stay together. The Devourers create a hive mind from everything they absorb. If you get separated, you might forget who you are." Lieutenant Keth gripped his weapon tighter. "Sergeant, how do you fight an enemy that can turn your own thoughts against you?" "You don't think," Rodriguez replied simply. "You act on instinct and training. That's why humans are good at this. We're too stubborn to be completely absorbed." The transport ship was suddenly surrounded by organic material. The Devourer absorption process began, with living tissue flowing over the hull like water. Inside the ship, the team watched their readings go wild as the enemy tried to break down their vessel. "Absorption complete," Dr. Narn announced, her voice tight with fear and excitement. "We're inside the mothership's digestive system." Rodriguez stood up and activated his suit's full combat mode. Around him, the other team members did the same. Their equipment was designed specifically for this environment. using technologies that the Devourers couldn't understand or absorb. "Move out," Rodriguez ordered. They cut their way through the organic walls of the transport, emerging into a nightmare landscape. The interior of the mothership was a maze of absorbed structures from hundreds of different civilizations. Confederation ships hung suspended in organic webbing, their crews long since consumed. Ancient ruins from Dr. Narn's archaeological sites were embedded in the walls, still glowing with unknown energy. "My God," whispered Dr. Narn. "Some of these structures are from civilizations that died out millions of years ago. Stay focused, Doc," Rodriguez warned, leading the team deeper into the creature. "We're not here for sightseeing." The team moved through corridors that shifted and changed around them. The mothership was still growing, still adapting, incorporating new absorbed materials into its structure. They passed chambers filled with thousands of organic pods, each one containing the consciousness of someone the Devourers had consumed. Lieutenant Keth stopped in front of one chamber. "Sergeant, these pods, there are people in them. They're still alive." Rodriguez looked at the Draconian's readings. The pods contained not just physical forms, but active brain patterns. The absorbed beings were still conscious, trapped in the Devourer's collective mind. "That's the real horror of these things," Rodriguez said quietly. "They don't just kill you. They make you part of themselves forever." Dr. Narn was scanning the absorbed structures around them. "Sergeant, I'm detecting human technology in the ship's core. Old human technology, from before your species went into isolation." Rodriguez checked his own readings. She was right. Deep in the mothership's center, there were signatures that matched ancient Terran designs. The Devourers must have absorbed a human colony during their first incursion into the galaxy, he realized. That's how they learned to adapt so quickly to our current technology. The team pressed forward, fighting their way through creatures that had once been the crew members of absorbed ships. The Devourers had turned them into antibodies, defenders of the mothership's internal systems. As they moved deeper, the absorbed human technology became more prominent. Entire sections of ancient Earthships were built into the creature's structure, their systems still partially functional after thousands of years. There, Dr. Narn pointed ahead, the central consciousness chamber. The team emerged into a vast spherical space filled with floating organic material. At the center was a massive brain-like structure that pulsed with the thoughts of billions of absorbed minds. The consciousness of every civilization the Devourers had consumed was trapped in that central mass. Rodriguez began setting up the specialized charges his team had brought. These weren't normal explosives. They were consciousness disruptors, designed to shatter the mental links that held the Devourer collective together. "Sergeant," Lieutenant Keth called out, "we have company." The chamber began filling with absorbed beings from dozens of different species. But these weren't mindless zombies. They were the strongest minds the Devourers had consumed, turned into guardians of the central consciousness. Among them, Rodriguez saw something that made his blood run cold. Human figures in ancient armor, members of the colony that had been absorbed millennia ago. They had been fighting the Devourers from within for thousands of years, and they were still losing. "Colonel Martinez," Rodriguez called out to one of the ancient human figures. "Can you hear me?" The absorbed human turned toward him, and for a moment recognition flickered in its eyes. "Rodriguez," it whispered. How long have I been in here?" 3,000 years, sir," Rodriguez replied, never stopping his work on the charges. "We're here to finish what you started." The ancient soldier nodded slowly. "The core, you have to destroy the central consciousness. But Rodriguez, the moment you do, everything this creature has absorbed will die with it. Billions of conscious beings." Rodriguez paused in his work. Around him, the team continued fighting off the absorbed guardians. Dr. Narn was frantically scanning the central consciousness, trying to find a way to separate the absorbed minds before destroying the Devourer. "Sergeant," she called out, "I might be able to modify your charges to disrupt only the Devourer's control systems. The absorbed consciousness could be freed instead of destroyed." "How long do you need?" Rodriguez asked, shooting down another guardian. 10 minutes, she replied. Rodriguez looked at his team, then at the hundreds of guardians pouring into the chamber. "You've got 5. Lieutenant Keth moved up beside him. "Sergeant, even if we succeed, how do we get out of here?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "We don't, Lieutenant. That's what it means to walk into the fire. Sometimes you don't walk back out. The battle for the consciousness of a billion absorbed souls began in earnest, and somewhere in the chaos, ancient human soldiers who had been fighting for 3,000 years finally began to hope. Dr. Velith Narn's 4 arms moved faster than she had ever thought possible, modifying the consciousness disruptor charges while battles raged around her. The central chamber of the Devourer mothership had become a war zone where the past and present collided. Ancient human soldiers fought alongside modern Terran special forces, their armor scarred from thousands of years of internal warfare. Lieutenant Keth had taken position beside a absorbed Draconian general who had been consumed decades ago but still retained enough of his mind to fight for freedom. Dr. Narn, Sergeant Rodriguez called out while firing at a swarm of absorbed Kashari. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." "Almost there," she replied, her skin shifting through rapid color changes that showed her extreme concentration. "But Sergeant, what I'm seeing in these absorption patterns, it's impossible." Rodriguez ducked behind cover as energy bolts flew over his head. "What's impossible about it?" "The human minds that were absorbed first. They're not just fighting the Devourer control. They're actually winning. Slowly, over centuries, they've been taking control of absorbed sections of the ship." Colonel Martinez, the ancient human soldier, appeared beside them. His armor was a patchwork of repairs made from absorbed alien technology. "She's right, Rodriguez. We've been building a resistance network inside this thing for 3 millennia. Every mind the Devourers absorb, we try to reach first. How many have you saved?" Rodriguez asked. "Millions," Martinez replied. "But we've been waiting for someone from outside to help us break free completely." Dr. Narn looked up from her work. "Colonel, the absorption process, it's not just taking consciousness. It's taking genetic information, technological knowledge, everything. The Devourers learn and adapt from every species they consume. That's why they're so dangerous," Martinez confirmed. "They don't just grow stronger, they grow smarter." Across the chamber, Lieutenant Keth was fighting beside creatures that had once been his enemies. The shared horror of absorption had united beings who would normally never cooperate. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he called out. "The absorbed Confederation officers are telling me something important. The Devourers aren't just random destroyers. They're searching for something specific." "What kind of something?" Rodriguez demanded while replacing his weapon's power cell. An absorbed Altarian scientist crawled over to their position. Half of his body had been converted to organic machinery, but his mind was still his own. "They're looking for what they call the first pattern, the original template that all conscious life developed from." Dr. Narn's skin went completely white. "The first pattern, that's mentioned in the oldest human legends I've studied. It's supposed to be the fundamental structure of consciousness itself." Colonel Martinez nodded grimly. "The Devourers believe that if they can find and absorb the first pattern, they can control the development of consciousness throughout the universe. Every thinking being would become part of their collective." "And they think humans have it," Rodriguez realized. "Not just have it," Martinez corrected. "They think humans are it, the first species to develop true consciousness, the template from which all other awareness developed." The implications hit everyone at once. If the Devourers were right, then absorbing humanity wouldn't just add human knowledge to their collective. It would give them the ability to control every conscious being in existence. That's why they keep coming back to this galaxy," Dr. Narn whispered. "They're not just hunting randomly. They're following the trail of consciousness evolution back to its source." Suddenly, new alarms began sounding throughout the mothership. The absorbed beings around them started moving with coordinated purpose instead of individual thought. "The main collective is taking direct control," Colonel Martinez warned. "They know we're close to breaking free." Dr. Narn's equipment beeped rapidly. "Charges are ready. But Sergeant, if I'm right about the consciousness patterns, freeing all these minds at once might do more than just damage the Devourers." "What do you mean?" Rodriguez asked. "I mean, it might trigger a consciousness cascade throughout the entire Devourer fleet. Every absorbed mind in every ship, all breaking free simultaneously." Lieutenant Keth looked around at the thousands of organic pods visible in the chamber walls. "How many minds are we talking about?" "Based on my readings? Billions," Dr. Narn replied. "The consciousness of entire civilizations." Rodriguez made his decision. "Do it." "Sergeant, you don't understand," Dr. Narn protested. "The energy released from freeing that many minds simultaneously, it could destroy everything within several light years, including Centralis Prime." "Doc, look around you," Rodriguez said calmly. If we don't stop the Devourers here, they'll consume the entire galaxy eventually. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save anything. Colonel Martinez placed a hand on Rodriguez's shoulder. There might be another way. The absorbed human minds have been working on something for centuries. A way to channel the consciousness cascade into the Devourer's own absorption networks. You mean turn their own system against them? Dr. Narn asked. Exactly. Instead of releasing the energy outward, we force it back through their collective consciousness. Overload their ability to process absorbed minds. Dr. Narn began working on her equipment again. That's brilliant. But it would require someone to stay behind and manually control the process. Someone would have to remain connected to the Devourer consciousness during the cascade. The chamber fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle. Everyone understood what that meant. Whoever stayed behind would be torn apart by the conflicting consciousness patterns. I'll do it, Colonel Martinez said immediately. No, Rodriguez replied. You've been trapped in here for 3,000 years. You've earned your freedom. Sergeant, Martinez smiled sadly. I died 3,000 years ago. I've just been too stubborn to accept it. But you still have a life to live. Before Rodriguez could protest, Dr. Narn interrupted. There's another problem. Even if we succeed here, this is only one mothership. My long-range scans show dozens of others approaching from outside the galaxy. The Devourers didn't send just one fleet. They sent everything they have. Lieutenant Keth checked his weapon readouts. How do we fight dozens of motherships? We don't fight them, came a new voice. General Sarah Chen's image appeared on their communication screens. We make them fight each other. General? Rodriguez responded. How are you reaching us inside the mothership? Your consciousness disruptor charges are creating a temporary communication window, Chen explained. Rodriguez, what you're about to do will send a consciousness cascade through the entire Devourer fleet network. But if we time it right, we can use that cascade to turn their own absorption systems against each other. Dr. Narn looked up from her final preparations. General, are you saying we can make the Devourer ships start absorbing each other? That's exactly what I'm saying, Doctor. The consciousness cascade will confuse their collective intelligence. They'll see other Devourer ships as threats to be absorbed instead of parts of their own fleet. Rodriguez understood immediately. They'll tear themselves apart. But, General Chen continued, someone has to stay behind to maintain the cascade long enough for the confusion to spread through their entire network. We're talking about at least an hour of direct consciousness interface. Colonel Martinez was already moving toward Dr. Narn's equipment. Then we better get started. Colonel, wait, Dr. Narn called out. I've been studying the absorption patterns. The cascade might not just free the absorbed minds. It might actually send their consciousness back to their original bodies, if any part of them still exists. Martinez paused. You mean the people in those pods might actually wake up? In their own bodies? I mean the people in those pods might walk out of here alive, Dr. Narn confirmed. Around the chamber, thousands of organic pods began to pulse with new light. Inside them, the absorbed consciousness of countless beings stirred with the first hope they had felt in years, decades, or centuries. Rodriguez looked at his team, at the ancient human soldiers, and at the billions of trapped minds waiting for freedom. Then let's bring them all home. The final phase of humanity's greatest battle was about to begin, and this time they weren't fighting alone. The consciousness cascade began as a whisper in the minds of billions. Then it became a roar that shook the very foundations of reality. Colonel Martinez stood at the center of the disruption field, his ancient armor crackling with energy as consciousness patterns flowed through him. Around the chamber, the organic pods began to crack open, releasing beings who had been trapped for decades or centuries. It's working, Dr. Velith Narn called out, her instruments showing cascade patterns spreading throughout the Devourer fleet. The consciousness liberation is jumping from ship to ship through their network connections. Sergeant Rodriguez helped a recently freed Altarian scientist to his feet. The being looked around in confusion, then recognition dawned in his eyes. How long? The scientist asked weakly. 43 years, Rodriguez replied gently. Lieutenant Keth was assisting a group of Draconian soldiers who had been absorbed during the first attacks. Their scales had been partially converted to organic machinery, but they were themselves again. Sergeant, Keth reported, the freed Confederation personnel are saying something strange. They remember being connected to the Devourer collective consciousness, but they also remember something else, a presence that was protecting them. Rodriguez looked over at Colonel Martinez, who was now completely surrounded by swirling energy patterns. The ancient human's form was becoming translucent as the consciousness cascade tore through him. Martinez was telling the truth, Rodriguez realized. The absorbed human minds have been fighting from inside for 3,000 years. They've been protecting every consciousness the Devourers consumed. Dr. Narn's reading suddenly spiked. Sergeant, the cascade is reaching critical mass. It's about to jump to the other motherships. Outside the ship, space itself began to change. The Devourer fleet, which had been moving in perfect coordination, suddenly erupted into chaos. Ships that had been part of the same collective consciousness for millennia began attacking each other. General Sarah Chen's voice reached them through the communication link. Rodriguez, the cascade is working beyond our best projections. The Devourer ships are not just fighting each other, they're actually trying to absorb each other. Through the chamber's organic walls, they could see the results. Massive Devourer vessels wrapped around each other like fighting serpents, their absorption systems working at full power. But instead of one ship consuming the other, both ships began to tear themselves apart. General, Dr. Narn called out, I'm reading consciousness signatures from across the entire fleet. Billions of minds are breaking free simultaneously. And they're all heading home, General Chen confirmed. Doctor, your theory was correct. The consciousness cascade isn't just freeing trapped minds. It's actually restoring them to their original bodies wherever those bodies still exist. Around Centralis Prime, escape pods that had been floating dead in space for years suddenly came back to life. On the planet's surface, medical facilities reported impossible recoveries as consciousness returned to bodies that had been in unexplained comas. But the price of victory was becoming clear. Colonel Martinez was barely solid now, his form held together only by his connection to the consciousness cascade. Rodriguez, he called out, his voice echoing strangely. The cascade is spreading beyond the Devourer fleet. It's reaching into deep space, finding other absorbed minds from across the galaxy. How is that possible? Rodriguez asked. Because the Devourers have been active for millions of years, Martinez replied. Every civilization they ever consumed is connected to this network. We're not just freeing recent victims, we're freeing everyone they've ever absorbed. Dr. Narn's instruments were going wild. Sergeant, I'm detecting consciousness patterns from species that the Confederation has never even heard of. Ancient civilizations from before our recorded history. Lieutenant Keth helped another group of freed beings toward the exit. How many minds are we talking about? Trillions, Dr. Narn whispered. The consciousness of entire galaxies worth of civilizations. The implications were staggering. The Devourers hadn't just been attacking their galaxy. They had been consuming conscious life throughout the universe for eons. And now all of that trapped consciousness was breaking free at once. Colonel Martinez began to fade completely. Rodriguez, I can see them all. Every mind we're freeing, every consciousness returning home. It's beautiful. Colonel, hold on, Rodriguez called out. We can extract you from the cascade. No, Martinez replied, his voice now coming from everywhere at once. I need to guide them home. All of them. That's what humans do, Rodriguez. We walk into the fire so others can find their way out. The ancient soldier smiled one last time before dissolving completely into the consciousness stream, but his presence remained, guiding trillions of liberated minds back to their origins across space and time. Outside the mothership, the Devourer fleet was tearing itself apart completely. Ships that had been the size of cities crumbled as their absorption systems overloaded. The collective consciousness that had held them together for millions of years finally collapsed under the weight of its own liberated victims. Sergeant, Dr. Narn said urgently, the mothership is beginning structural collapse. We need to evacuate now. Rodriguez gathered his team and the remaining freed prisoners. As they moved toward the exit, he looked back at the central consciousness chamber one last time. Where the massive brain-like structure had been, there was now only empty space filled with dancing lights, the last traces of liberated consciousness finding their way home. They barely made it to their transport before the mothership began its final collapse. As they pulled away, Rodriguez watched through the viewport as the massive creature folded in on itself, its absorption systems finally consuming the ship that had housed them. Back on Centralis Prime, Ambassador Zephyrian Koss stood before the assembled Galactic Council. His silver skin caught the light as he made the most important announcement in Confederation history. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, today we learned that the legends of the Terran species were not myths but promises. For 3,000 years, humanity has been protecting us from threats we never even knew existed. Dr. Velith Narn appeared beside him, her skin showing the deep blue of profound respect. The humans didn't abandon the galaxy when they achieved advanced civilization. They chose to become its guardians, fighting battles in the darkness so the rest of us could live in the light. Admiral Thane Vex, his massive draconian form standing at attention, added his voice to the announcement. The Terran Expeditionary Force has offered to train our military forces in their methods. Not for conquest, but for protection. They call it the Terran Doctrine. General Sarah Chen appeared on the communication screens throughout the galaxy. Her image was broadcast to every inhabited world in Confederation space. The Devourer threat is ended, she announced simply, but there are other threats out there. Dangers that exist beyond normal space and time. Humanity offers to share our knowledge and our burden. Together, we can ensure that no civilization ever again faces absorption and extinction. In the weeks that followed, the first joint training facilities were established. Confederation soldiers learned new ways of thinking about warfare, not as conquest but as protection. They learned that sometimes victory required walking into the fire, not because you could survive it, but because someone had to. Captain Elena Vasquez became the first human ambassador to the Confederation, working to build bridges between humanity's warrior culture and the galaxy's peaceful civilizations. Dr. Velith Narn established the Institute for Human Studies, dedicated to understanding how a species could evolve beyond its destructive tendencies to become protectors instead of conquerors. And in training facilities across Confederation space, soldiers from dozens of different species learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to walk into the fire anyway because someone had to, and they had made themselves capable of surviving it. The galaxy had learned that its ancient legends were real, and in learning that truth, they discovered something even more important. They were no longer alone in the darkness. Humanity had come home to a galaxy that finally understood what it meant to be, protected by those who chose to bear the burden of guardianship. The legends had walked out of myth and into reality, and they had brought hope with them. The age of the Terran Doctrine had begun, and with it, a new understanding of what it truly meant to be civilized.